just to give you guys a couple examples of myself, right? And some of you are young, you might not remember him, but the televangelists. I used to point to Jimmy Baker. Yeah, he was having affairs. Jimmy Swaggart having affairs. Creflo Dollar embezzling money. Ted Haggard. All these guys, people using religion to do bombing attacks. I would point at all of these people and say, look at that stuff. It doesn't work. It's all crap, right? So pointing fingers at others, not look at me. And by doing that, I would not have to look at the spiritual side of life. And these things are man's business. They're not God's business. That's man's business. In our personal stories, you will find a wide variation in the way each teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself. Whether we agree with a particular approach or conception seems to make little difference. Experience has taught us that these are matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. They are questions for each individual to settle for himself. Okay, we're going to highlight the whole next paragraph. On one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself, obviously, or herself. This power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. As a celebrated American statesman put it, let's look at the record. Okay, so right at the top of what we just highlighted, where it said these men and women, you can write first 100 and authors of stories. That's who they're talking about. They're talking about the first 100 people who wrote this book with Bill and the authors of the stories in the back. Right? But we ourselves, of course, can add to them any speaker that we hear or any people that we hear in these meetings who's done the work. Now, the celebrated American statesman that said, let's look at the record, it won't keep you sober, but it was Al Smith, governor of New York, said that in 1924. Here are thousands of men and women worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power and to do certain simple things, underline simple things, and write 12 steps/actions. 12 steps/actions. There has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. And that has certainly happened to me. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly, underline the next 5 words, met a few simple requirements. Okay, so underneath that, write mandatory, the steps. They're saying they're requirements. That means they're mandatory. Right? And we're going to talk about this, the word suggestion next week. But right here, it's mandatory, and it's the 12 steps. And, myself, I couldn't stop using. I was full of fear. I was full of anger. I was physically near death. Hatred. I wanted to kill myself. I couldn't hold. It was into what I am today. Collapse and despair. Right. Revolutionary change in the way of living and thinking. Absolutely. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. Highlight the next 3 lines. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to draw under that sentence, they show how the change came over them. We're going to draw a line across the whole page, right? And then underneath that line on the right, we're going to write how to live with an arrow going down. You can write no more booze talk, how to live on one side, and you can write how to find higher power on the other side. All right, so we're done. We're done with step 1. They're going to tell us from here on out what to do. When many hundreds of people are able to say, highlight the next 3 lines, that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. And for me, that still floors me, and I still get aghast when I read that. But who do I go to in the morning, and who do I go to throughout the day, and who do I go to at night? So that's true in my life, but I'm still a little bit aghast about it. But that is absolutely true for me. This world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than in all the millenniums which went before. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today. The intellect simply means the capacity to learn. Yet in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. In the realm of the material, underline the next 3 lines, I guess. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Just that little bit right there. So that's why, they didn't have the idea of scientific inquiry, so they did not make scientific progress. Some of the contemporaries of Columbus, circle Columbus, thought a round earth preposterous. Others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies. I think Galileo might have said, hey, the earth is not the center of the universe, the sun is. He almost got killed for that, right? So let's go to Columbus for a little bit so you can set the book aside for a minute. So Columbus, and I kind of wrote some stuff up here. I did it from memory, so I didn't get everything quite right. But Columbus is one of the greatest examples ever on what you can do with belief when you're willing to change your belief. 550 years ago, most of what was called the civilized world was situated around the Mediterranean Sea and the western shores of Europe. Now these guys, they found a place called the East Indies. And the East Indies had all kinds of cool stuff. They had silk, spices. They had goods for the rich and the well-to-do. And everybody was looking for a new trade route to get to the East Indies, right, to get this stuff. And some of the people said, hey, can we sail there? And they said, no, come on, you knucklehead, you can't sail there. You got to go to the northeast end of the Mediterranean Sea. You park your ship, and then you go by horseback, camelback, or you walk. And it takes years. And it said, well, and then they'd say, well, but how about if we sailed there? And they said, no, you knucklehead. If you try to sail there, you're gonna go off the edge of the world, right? And maybe that's because some people sailed off and they never came back, right? All of a sudden, here comes Columbus. Columbus was one tough son of a bitch, right? And we believe that Columbus had to be an alcoholic, right? Because if you're going to believe differently than everybody, and you're going to express that belief different than everybody, you got to be pretty tough. So Columbus said, I believe the world is round. Now, when people believed differently back then, you might have got burned at the stake, you might have got hung from the gallows, and they might have took a big axe and chopped your head off, right? If you believe differently and you express that belief. So we got to believe that Columbus is alcoholic, because he made one of the most drunk statements ever. He said, I believe we can get east by sailing west, right? Other things that tell us that Columbus is an alcoholic. When he left, he didn't know where he was going. When he got there, he didn't know where he was. And when he got back, he did not know where he had been, right? But what really makes Columbus an alcoholic is a woman financed the whole trip for him, right? And she did it twice, right? The Queen of Spain. So the formula that the world has always known, I'm stealing all this from Joe and Charlie, I just love it. The formula the world has always known to change anything. This is what you got to do to change anything ever, right? First of all, you got to be willing to do so. And circumstances make us willing. Columbus was looking for a new trade route. I was almost dead, right? Broke and homeless. 2, you got to believe you can do so, right? He believed he could get east by sailing west, right? But he's still standing on the shore when he believes that. Me, right? I read this book, I read the stories, and I saw other people who had recovered, right? So that helped me to believe. The next thing we got to do is we got to make a decision. I'm going to find out, right? Now that decision did Columbus no good because he's still standing on the shore. So what has to happen is you got to start taking action. So Columbus went to the King of Portugal, and the king said, no way, man, I'll lose my investment. You're going to sail off the edge of the world. So then he went to the Queen of Spain, and he convinced her that he could do it. She gave him money. He bought ships, provision, and men, right? And then he got ready, and then he left. He took action. He sailed east, or he sailed west to get east. And we don't know this for sure, but everybody suspect, the historians suspect, that Columbus had a special sailor on the bow of the lead ship. And he said, look, man, I'm 90% sure that the world is round, but if you do see the edge of it, start yelling loudly so we can turn the ship around so we don't go off the edge. Columbus sailed straight west for several days, and he got results. He found land. Now, it was the West Indies, not the East Indies, but he came back and he went to the Queen of Spain and he said, refinance me and I'll go back. And this time, I'll promise you, I'll get the silk, the spices, the fish sauce, the linens, the pottery, and all of these wonderful things that you want. Now, the second time that Columbus took off from Spain, he got ships, men, provisions. He did not put that special sailor on the bow of the lead ship. The first time Columbus went on belief. The second time he went back on faith. We cannot start with faith. We can only start with belief. We start with belief. We make the decision, step 3. We take the action, steps 4 through 11. We get the results after we do the work, and then we have the faith, right? So the first thing to recover from alcoholism is to be willing to change. The second is to believe we can do so. The third is to make the decision to find out. And 4 is to take action, right? 4 through 11. The decision, step 3, does us no good unless we take action. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. We had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. We didn't get it before them, as the result of these steps. Step 2 does not say came to know. It doesn't say came to had faith in. It only says came to believe, right? Now, me, myself, I no longer believe that God's going to restore me to sanity. I know it because He's done so, right? We get the faith after doing the work. We go to the newcomer. We get the newcomer to believe, step 2. Help them to make a decision, step 3. We take them by the hand, walk them through the action steps, 4 through 11. They do the work, they get the results, they have the awakening. Then they go to the newcomer, right? The only thing that we cannot do for the newcomer is to make them willing. We cannot make them willing, man. That's a job they got to do by themselves, right? And the only way they're going to become willing is by drinking lots of whiskey, ending up in jail, losing their job, becoming hopeless, getting divorced, right? If there was any way that I could have a little syringe with 500 cc's of willingness and I could inject the newcomer with it, I would do it. But I can't do that. They got to do it themselves. People say, hey man, I've been coming to AA and I've been trying to work step 1 for the last year, right? You don't work step 1 in these rooms. You work step 1 out there, right? You work it out there. Now, people say you can't sponsor somebody for a year. Well, if that was true, we would not be here. A lot of us might be dead, right? Abby went to Bill with 2 months sobriety. Bill went to Dr. Bob with 6 months sobriety. Dr. Bob went to the guy in the hospital, Bill Dotson, with like 10 days sobriety. So, having a year sobriety before you go to somebody is nonsense, right? I was sober 6 months. When I started my first Code Blue, I was ready to drink when I was sober. I was ready to maybe kill myself. I was going nuts, right? So 3 months into it, another guy there that was also 9 months sober and 20 years younger than me, that he got assigned to be my sponsor. He had done the work and I hadn't, right? And so he was able to help me through this work, right? So I know that if I need the power, and the beginning of this power is just to believe, right? They're gonna give us the procedure to find this power. And in about 3 pages, they're going to be telling us where we can find this power, right? So, and it's not the hellfire and the brimstone that I thought it was as I was a child, right? I've come to understand that it's, and I don't even know what my God is, to be honest with you guys. Somebody about a month ago said that his God, he looked at it as a friend. And I started doing that, and I like it. So I'm going to say that my conception of God is as a friend of somebody that hopefully is going to help me out, right? And that's enough. That's enough for me. Back to the book. We asked ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as were the ancients about the realm of the material? Even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print an account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. Had not all efforts at flight failed before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? Was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proved man could never fly? So Professor Langley almost beat the Wright brothers, right? But he crashed that last time and he stopped. The Wright brothers flew, it was 12/8/1903 that the Wright brothers flew for the first time in North Carolina, Kitty Hawk. Had not people said God had reserved this privilege to the birds? Only 30 years later, the conquest of the air was almost an old story and airplane travel was in full swing. Highlight the next 2 lines. But in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation of our thinking. So next to that, we're just going to write, look at things differently. Look at things differently. And this happens with every generation that comes along. You know, hey, you're so old-fashioned, right? Every single generation. Show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he will say, I bet they do it. Maybe not so long either. We're going to write July 20th, 1969, landed on moon. Right? 30 years after this book came out, they landed on the moon. I mean, that was another wonderful example of how to change something, right? We saw Sputnik, and we got scared that the Russians had this satellite, and we became willing, right? We believed we could do it. We made a decision. Kennedy made a decision to pour all this money into the space program, and then we took action, and by God, we landed on the moon. Let's highlight the next 5 lines. Is not our age characterized by the ease with which we discard old ideas for new, by the complete readiness with which we throw away the theory or gadget which does not work for something new which does? Right? That's even more true today. I mean, I know people, they got to have a new phone every 6 months, right? I need the new whatever, right? So I'm going to have you guys go ahead and highlight the whole next paragraph. Go ahead and get that done. And on one side, I'm going to just have you write anti-promises. I want you to do that before we read it. So highlight the whole next paragraph. And on the left, just write anti-promises. And then on the other side, write, ask sponsee, does he feel like this? Because we're going to read this one slowly. So on one side, write anti-promises. On the other, write ask sponsee, does he, she feel like this? And we're going to number the anti-promises. We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. Okay, so put a 1 in front of we. We were having trouble with personal relationships. I think that's true for most of us. Put a 2 in front of the next we. We couldn't control our emotional natures. I mean, I got to tell you, how many times, we get fired and end up in jail, things of that nature. Put a 3 in front of we. We were a prey to misery and depression. Poor me, poor me, pour me another drink. Put a 4 in front of we. We couldn't make a living. Put a 5 in front of we. We had a feeling of uselessness. Put a 6 in front of the next we. We were full of fear. 7, we were unhappy. 8, we couldn't seem to be of real help to other people, right? So, when we read these with our sponsee, we're going to say, hey man, Have you felt like this? Do you feel like this? Right? And they're probably gonna say most of them are true, right? Was not a basic solution to these bedevilments, circle bedevilments, more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. When we saw others highlight the next 4 lines, when we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, another word for God, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. After that, write solution. And then off to the left, we're going to write spirit of hope message at meetings. That's what we got to give to the newcomer. Spirit of hope message at meetings. I don't want some long, drawn-out drunk-a-log and how horrible. I want to give these people a spirit of hope message so that they come back. And they say, my God, I want to get what these guys have. I'm going to come back and listen, man. Maybe I'm going to listen to these guys. And maybe, just maybe, I'll do these stupid stairs that they're talking about, right? We got to get them to come back. The Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Everybody told them they couldn't do it. And then, they're like little kids. They're like, yeah, we can. Without that, nothing could have happened. So, highlight the next sentence. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency would solve our problems. Okay, so at the bottom of the page, let's write, my way of doing things kept me stuck, / self-reliance. My way of doing things kept me stuck, / self-reliance. Right? I'd be at rock bottom, right? No money, fired, everybody estranged from everybody, maybe facing legal consequences, and I'd get out of treatment, and I'd say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, right? And so I wouldn't look at this God business at all. I was going to fix it by my knowledge of my disease and by my self-will, right? And it didn't work. When others showed us that God's sufficiency worked with them, we began to feel like those who had insisted the Wrights would never fly. So at the top of the page, let's write, people need to go through the insanity of over and over and over. People need to go through the insanity of over and over and over. I certainly did. I'm going to get that tape cleaned up and I'll play it for you guys, and you'll see I had another 12 or 14 years of drinking after that. People need to go through the insanity of over and over and over. Logic is great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. It is not by chance we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions. That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it is more sane and logical to believe than not to believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up our hands in doubt and said, we don't know. After that, write agnostic, agnostic. And then we're going to highlight the whole next little paragraph there. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? So next to that, we're going to write, no halfways, ask sponsee, what is your choice? No halfways, ask sponsee, what is your choice? And we're not defining this. All it is there's something that's stronger than my little thoughts and my little problems, right? We're not defining it. Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over, underlined, the bridge of reason, right? That's a name for a deity, toward the desired shore of faith. The outlines and the promise of the new land, underline new land, had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Okay, underline the next 7 words. Friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. Next to that, write meetings, right? And again, when you go to, you got your regular meeting, and when you see a newcomer that you haven't ever seen before, you greet them. You go up and shake your hand and say, welcome. We were grateful that reason, underline reason, it's capitalized, that reason had brought us so far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. So next to that, let's write reason is God-given. That was natural, but let us think a little more closely. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? Hold on, don't turn the page. At the bottom of the page, let's write, how well has thinking my way to better living worked? How well has thinking my way to better living worked? Not at all. Right? I'm going to get up every morning and work out. I'm going to do yoga. I'm going to drink mineral water. Whenever I feel like having a beer, I'm going to drink mineral water. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Whenever I have a using thought, I'm going to think about something else. How well has thinking my way to better living worked? Not at all. And then above it, again, if you've got any more room in there, right? Conduct self as if God is real. So if you're having trouble with this God thing, write a few words down that you would like God to be, and just for the hell of it, for like 2 or 3 weeks, conduct yourself as if what you wrote is real, and see if anything's different. It's a nice little experiment. Conduct self as if God is real. For did not we believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Yes, we had been faithful, abjectly faithful to the God of reason. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. We found, too, that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental gooseflesh that used to bring on. Highlight the next sentence. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? Okay. Just that line. And then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? Who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw at last. Were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else. So next to that, near the top of that paragraph, write materialistic. And then just keep writing down, write faith in God rather than materialism. You know, why is it some of us, there's a higher rate, I think, among suicide among rich alcoholics than there is among the poor. And I think there's a higher rate of suicide among rich folk altogether, right? So, I was taught that if you get a good job, you got plenty of money, you got a big house and a nice car and a good-looking girlfriend, that's all you need to be happy, right? Well, it was wrong. And I didn't care what I had, nothing. For me, because there was no God, it didn't do crap for me. Imagine life without faith. Were nothing left but pure reason, it wouldn't be life. But we believed in life, of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense that you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points, yet there it was. Could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling onto a destiny of nothingness? Right? Again, off to the left, you can write worshipped money, power, sex, myself. Right? Worshipped money, power, sex, and myself. Gesundheit. Meaning nothing, whirling on to a destiny of nothingness. Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves had more intelligence than that, at least so the chemist said. Hence we saw that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable. Though it emanate from our best minds, what about people who prove that man could never fly? Yet we had been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible and we only smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but liked to tell ourselves it wasn't true. And that was me. I saw people get better, and I said, okay, whatever, guys. Let's highlight the next 3 lines. Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Okay, so highlight that, and above it, above actually, write on the inside. And let's write instructions on where to find God. They're telling us where God is. It's in us. Instructions on where to find God, and then somewhere in there write, what's keeping me alive? What's keeping me alive? And then I wrote it at the top of the page. I drew a little arrow up, but they say deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. At the top, let's write the little voice. That little voice. John, I don't think you should, you got a month sober. I don't think you should go meet your friends at that bar. But I do it anyway. The little voice, the conscience. The conscience. Innate knowledge. Innate knowledge, common sense, and the soul. Those are all terms you can use, right? For deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. The little voice, the conscience, innate knowledge, common sense, and the soul. And I wish I could find this doggone study. I saw it years ago. There was a woman, or they did some kind of weird study. They had these little toddlers, and they gave them like little colorful candies or something like this. And it turns out that when the kids were young, they gave them a choice on keeping them or giving them to the other child across from them. They would give more to the other kid across from them, right? But now they do that same test with these same kids 3 or 4 or 5 years later, and all of a sudden these kids are taking more for themselves instead of giving to the other kid. I mean, isn't that crazy? And the next sentence right here is going to tell us why. It may be obscured by calamity, underline calamity, by pomp, underline pomp, or by worship of other things, and underline worship of other things. But in some form or another, it is there. Okay, so, so they're telling us that it's the conscience, the little voice. It's inside of us, right? Deep down inside of us. And it's being obscured. And we're going to get rid of all this crap. We're going to get rid of calamity. We're going to get rid of the pomp and the worship of other things when we do our 4th and our 5th step. We are going to get rid of that crap. So calamity. The calamity is the noise in your head. Can you imagine if you're having one of those days where you're full of fear and you're pissed off at everybody? If they surgically implanted a microphone into your head and everybody could hear those thoughts, that's the calamity, man. That noise, right? The noise, the committee that goes on in our head, right? That calamity is keeping us from the little voice. Pomp. A definition of pomp, it's ostentatious boastfulness or vanity. Ego. That's what pomp is, right? So what is my status, man? I better be higher than that guy. I'm the best damn salesman, and they better know it, right? How dare they do that to me, right? Worship of other things. So what is worship of other things? It's admiration. So at the end of the day, what have you been thinking about the most? Right? Have you been thinking the most about money? Have you been thinking the most about what other people think about you, your status, and the recognition that you're not getting? Right? Have you been thinking about that girl that you just broke up with? I'm obsessing about, oh my God, I'm obsessing. How could she have done that, right? That's what we worship. The things that we think about the most. And all of that crap is blocking us off from our higher power, which is inside of us, right? And that's what hopefully we're gonna get rid of some of that noise when we do the 4th step. But in some form or another, it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. So next to that, let's write, be an asset to society or a liability, question mark. Be an asset to society or a liability, question mark. I got to tell you guys, for 48 years of my life, I was a big old liability, right? I mean, it was hard on the people I worked with. My parents, my God, it was horrible when I look back on it, the things that I did. So I don't want to be a liability anymore. I want to be an asset. What the hell can I bring to the table, right? I feel better. I can certainly look myself in the mirror much more when I'm an asset and I can bring something to the table. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. We found the great reality, capitalized, deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us. So next to that, let's write prayer and meditation. Find him. Prayer and meditation. Find him. Find her. Find whatever. I don't know what God is, right? I'm just using it because I have that written. So prayer and meditation. Find him. I can't define whatever it is. And again, it's that little voice. It's our conscience. It's our common sense. It's our soul. It's in us. We can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourage you to search diligently within yourself. Then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. Underline broad highway, capitalized. And then highlight to the end of the paragraph. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. So next to that, let's write seeking equals promises. Seeking equals promises, right? All they're saying is you've got to seek this higher power, right? Just seek it. We're going to get those doggone promises. In this book, you will read the experience of a man who thought he was an atheist. Circle the word atheist and draw a little arrow down to the bottom and write Fitz Mayo, F-I-T-Z, Mayo. And again, you can write our Southern friend, Fifth AA. So he was number 5, Fifth AA. And you can write started Detroit. So this guy started AA in Detroit. And we've already talked about Fitz Mayo a couple chapters back. He was the guy that went to the barn to die, right? So he's in this book 3 times. His story is so interesting that some of it should be told now. His change of heart was dramatic, convincing, moving. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended church school where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. Business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide. These calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Post-war disillusionment, ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. Next to that, write bedevilments. Right? So he's experiencing those 8 bedevilments that we read about a couple pages back. Bedevilments. One night, when confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic, underline, who had known a spiritual experience. Underline that little bit. And next to experience, write, had done the steps. Had done the steps. And just like Bill, he's going to get pissed. Our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, "If there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me." But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Highlight the squiggly lines. Who are you to say there is no God? This man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by the conviction of the presence of God. presence of God highlighted. It poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty of a great tide at flood. The barriers he had built through the years were swept away. He stood in the presence, underline the next 3 lines. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. He had stepped from bridge to shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his Creator. Okay, so highlight that, and then after Creator, right, he found faith. He found faith. Now, like Bill, he got knocked in the head with a baseball bat. That ain't going to happen. The vast majority of us, what we do is we do the work in this book, we do the steps, and we get a nice educational awakening, a spiritual awakening, right? Off to the left, let's write, intuitively know how to handle, ... That's from the promises. Intuitively know how to handle, ... through prayer and seeking God. Through prayer and seeking God. Intuitively know how to handle, ... That's, part of the promises. Through prayer and seeking God. Thus was our friend's cornerstone, underline cornerstone, fixed in place. No later vicissitude, okay, vicissitude means loss of interest, right? Remember, one of the main components of a spiritual awakening is that it is temporary, right? So thank goodness here, no later vicissitude has shaken it. His alcoholic problem was taken away that very night years ago. It disappeared. Okay, highlight, save for a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned. Just highlight that little thing there. So yes, we're going to have moments of temptation. You bet we are, man. I mean, I have these thoughts that still cross my mind. Sunday night, for example, Sunday night, I started smoking pot, right? And because I was smoking pot, then all of a sudden I wanted to drink, and then I started drinking again, and then it was a dream, right? But then I woke up in my dream, and my obsession to drink had me. I said, my God, I am screwed. So in my dream, I got high, right? Then I started drinking, and then when I woke up, and it's like, oh my God, when am I going to get my next drink? And then I said, my God, it's got me again, the obsession. And then I woke up, and I said, isn't that great? I got to use, and I didn't have to use. And I know that I was screwed if I did, right? So don't worry about using dreams. I haven't smoked pot in 15 years, right? I mean, it's been a while since I drank, I haven't used in over almost 6 years. But we're going to have those dreams, and that's normal. Don't worry about them, man. When you wake up, you can say, thank God I didn't do it. And we're also going to have moments of temptation, and that's okay, man. We're human. We're human. So, we can ask God for help. We can call our sponsor. It's going to pass. It's going to pass in a few minutes. At such times, a great revulsion have risen up in him. Seemingly, he could not drink even if he would. Underline, God had restored his sanity. God had restored his sanity. So next to that, we're going to write, mental obsession, someday I can drink, is gone. Mental obsession, someday I can drink, is gone. That's sanity. Right? The mental obsession, someday I can drink, is gone. That's sanity. And I'm not saying, every now and then I'll be driving along and my disease says, John, I think this whole thing was a mistake. 9 treatments, close to death, suicide. It was all a mistake, right? But of course, I laugh and I say, no, it wasn't a mistake. But, our disease is funny. It wants to kill us. What is this but a miracle of healing? Yet its elements are simple. We're going to underline to the end. Circumstances made him willing to believe. Next to that, write step 2. Circumstances made him willing to believe. He humbly offered himself to his Maker. Next to that, step 3. Step 3, then he knew. Even so, God has restored us all to our right minds. To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly, but he has come to all who have honestly sought him. Circle that word sought and write action. That's an action. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. We're going to write a few things and we'll get out of here. He disclosed himself, right? God could and would if he were sought. God could and would if he were sought. Don't deprive people of their bottom. Don't deprive people of their bottom, then get right with God. My sponsor he said, you let them hit and you let them hit hard. Because if they don't hit that bottom hard and break a couple of bones, they're not going to be willing to do the work. So don't deprive people of their bottom, then get right with God. Must seek him, her, it, whatever. Must seek him, seeking his action. Okay, and then we can write end of week 6 with sponsee. Now, there's a couple of exercises I want you just to write these down. These are a couple of things I'd like you to do. And also your sponsor, so you can write homework, right? Reread 567. That's Appendix 2, the spiritual experience. Reread 567. And again, if you haven't done the God is, just write a few things what you'd like God to be. Just a couple of things. And then write down how you relate to or how you have related to the anti-promises, to each anti-promise. And we're not going to talk about it here, but maybe show it to your sponsor. So write down how you relate to those bedevilments, the anti-promises, the 8 of them. I had all of them, and at the end, the thing I hung on to, my job, even at the end, that baby was gone. So let's end with the third step prayer, and we'll get out of here. God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Peace. All right, anybody who's anti-God, thanks for sitting through it.